The PE Umbrella, episode 117. Welcome to the PE Umbrella podcast with Ryan Ellis. Join me as I dig deep into the world of PE, interviewing inspiring practitioners from around the world, share my own teaching reflections, and discuss some awesome resources that you can use in your classroom. So what are you waiting for? Come on over and join me under the PE Umbrella. Hello there everybody, and welcome to the PE Umbrella podcast, and as always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And I say us, as for the first episode of 2019, I am joined by the Queen of Gymnastics, that is Gemma Coles. Now thank you so much for joining me today, Gemma. Could you just tell myself and the listeners of the PE Umbrella a little bit more about yourself and your teaching background?
Okay, yes, hello. It's a pleasure to be with you today. So thank you very much for inviting me. Obviously, my name's Gemma Coles, and I'm a gymnastics coach. And over the last few years, I've started becoming a bit of a gymnastics specialist. So I was a gymnastics coach, and I still run a recreational gymnastics club. But I started doing lots of work in schools over the last few years, probably about the last 8 years, and just got hugely passionate really about PE and gymnastics and helping teachers to improve their gymnastics coaching and teaching in schools. So yeah, that's really where I started from and where I am now.
Fantastic. So we have a fountain of knowledge to draw upon today, ladies and gentlemen, when we're listening to Gemma, of course. And before we dive into any misconceptions and top tips and knowledge bombs, all things primary gymnastics, can I just start by asking you, in your opinion, what are the particular benefits that gymnastics or a good gymnastics unit can bring to the development of children?
Okay, I think we're really lucky with gymnastics in that it covers lots of different areas. So you've got your balance, your coordination, your strength, your flexibility. If you do hand apparatus, you've even got a little bit of apparatus going on in there. So it's a really rounded sport, and it can be really versatile to transfer into other sports. So I think if you do a good unit of gymnastics, then it should help you in all aspects, even little things like posture. So being able to sit properly in class for classroom activities. I think that's why I'm so passionate about gym, because it's so broad. Yeah,
I agree with you. It is so transferable, and the skills you're going to pick up in a gymnastics unit are going to be transferable. And that is, number one of my selling points to a lot of students I teach. And I don't want to go and labour on this point, but I still think it is prevalent in areas of our society about this misconception, particularly from boys at primary age, about gymnastics. And one of my selling points to them is how it will help them across a range of other activities and sports. And if they want to pursue gymnastics, brilliant as well. Do you still come across this sort of pushback at all from boys or even girls in primary schools?
Because I've been doing gymnastics now for about 20 years, I would say it's improved year on year. So I'd say back 20 years ago, I'd say, yes, there was an awful lot of it, and I was probably seeing it at least once a week. But now I'm lucky if I see it sort of once a month. But it is still there.
Yeah,
but I think that's just school life. So I think, if you're going to come across a few children who are going to, be a bit like that, then you'll come across the odd one. And if they can just say, oh, gymnastics is girly, then they're going to say that. Or if not, they're going to say something else about you. But yeah, it's becoming less common. I think that's because we've had some great role models over the last few years, and I think whilst people are becoming influencers and personalities and and famous, that all these people have helped to make gymnastics have a better reputation for boys, and the strength aspect of it is so impressive. And because we're seeing it more, on social media and on television, I think that's changing people's attitudes slightly. It's taking a long time, but yes. I'm hoping it's improving year on year.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I'll hold my hands up and be one of the first to say, when I was in school growing up, I was one of those boys who was like, oh, gymnastics, this isn't for me. And I think it was just the way I was raised by my parents, the society that I grew up in. But I've got that challenge now with some of the boys, and a recent gymnastics unit I did as part of the sort of spectacular start to that unit was to sit and show them some YouTube videos at the beginning. And I showed them 3, one after the other. The first video I showed them was of Simone Biles doing an incredible routine. I think it was on the parallel bars or something like that. And she was incredible. The children couldn't believe what they were watching. The Second video I showed them was Max Whitlock and one of his floor routines from the past 18 months or so that he'd performed at the World Championships. And the one which really had them in, hook, line and sinker, and girls, boys were all just like, oh my goodness, this is incredible, was a video I took from Niall Wilson's YouTube channel. And he does something called the Ultimate Gymnastics Challenge, and he was challenging a 12 or 13-year-old boy to a range of gymnastics type activities, and there was just a few movements and skills on there which just left the children, jaws dropped literally. And from that moment on,
he's been amazing for gymnastics. Niall Wilson, he's really, he's really done really well, and loads of his videos are great. The other things I say is have a look at some of the tumbling videos, because I really do find the tumbling superhuman. So they'll do double and triple somersaults and then carry on traveling down the track. And I like just thinking about some of the footballers amongst your boys who like to score a goal and then go and do something impressive. I think that if they start thinking, oh my goodness, I might be able to do that one day.
Yes.
They love all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, look up on YouTube some of the high class tumbling.
Yeah.
Some of that is so impressive.
I think that would be almost a first tip. I don't know if you'd agree with this, that I would give to any teachers wanting to teach gymnastics. Is at the start of your unit, start them off with a wow factor and get some clips and videos on there just to sort of show them the elite level. Yes. And we're not saying that's where they're going to be after the unit doing the gymnastics with you, but this is what they can aspire to, and that might be the spark in a particular child's physical learning journey, which inspires them to want to pursue gymnastics. So it's well worth doing. As a top tip is start a unit off with some great visuals like that. I want to dive now, Gemma, if you don't mind, straight into the stigma or fear behind gymnastics. Now, I've worked as almost a consultant delivering CPD around schools up here in North Yorkshire for a few years myself, and gymnastics is, along with dance, I would say, is always one of those areas that comes up as teachers wanting help and support with, whether there's a fear behind it, they don't feel confident. Is it something you've seen a lot of, and where does this fear come from? Why is that?
I think the fear comes from when they do their teacher training courses, the sports section is quite small, and most certainly the gymnastics section is very, very small. So I think unless you've had a gymnastics or a sports background, I just don't think they even know where to begin. And I think that's hard. I think that's tough. I'm a gymnastics specialist, and if someone was to say to me, right, go and do a maths class with this very little knowledge that you've got. So I actually think the apprehension is quite understandable. And that's where, I've been trying to fill the gaps, really. So, trying to put on masterclasses and get some good resources out there. But I think they do need to, look to other people in the school that have got a little bit more experience maybe in the teaching gymnastics, and also, touch base with people like yourself and like I, and try and pull our knowledge out. I think it's getting better. Interestingly, as well, I sometimes see some really overconfident teachers who don't necessarily know much about gym, but just so keen and a few times I've had to say, oh, I'm not sure about that, or what?
That's a great point, Gemma, and I'm glad you've mentioned that, because it's something I didn't particularly hone in or think on, but now you've mentioned it, can you just think of a moment of something you've seen then in a classroom or in a session where you had to be like, oh, hang on a minute, not sure about that?
Like rebound, so anything where you can rebound off it, so trampettes or anything like that kind of, where I've seen, in somersaults and things like that are quite specialist skills. And if the children aren't taught correctly, I can just feel myself going, thinking, I'm not sure about that. But again, I think it's because the teachers haven't been told this is what you're not to do either. Because they've had not very much training, and so they, the children say, oh, I want to try this, and they think, oh, okay. And it depends on your personality type, doesn't it, whether or not you're cautious or not, as to what you then teach. Definitely rebound activities is not really a activity for a school lesson, maybe for a specialist club after school. But I have been known to say, I'm not sure if I would be teaching that.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense. I think I think it's something why I understand why teachers are apprehensive and scared of it, and it's usually the health and safety elements, I'm told. And I think across the curriculum, many teachers will say, well, I don't know how to play that sport, or I'm not very good at that myself. I always say, well, you don't have to be great at it yourself in order to be able to teach it. Would you say that rings true for gymnastics as well?
Yeah.
Did primary teachers have to be experts to teach gymnastics?
No, not at all. I think what you really need to be good at is pulling ideas from your children. So, for example, rolling. If you were to have a class full of children, you know, there was a mat between one or between two or between three of them. Ask someone within that class, do you know of a role? Can you model it, and can you maybe tell us a couple of tips and hints about it? Get them to tell you the name of their role, show you their role, and then you don't have to then model it yourself. The child is already doing it. You can then discuss it. What would make it look better? How could we do it a bit more carefully, or how could we make it a bit more daring? And use them as the resources, because you'll find there will be one or two children in your class that attend a gymnastics club or have some kind of experience from martial arts or from something else. If you don't have loads and loads of knowledge, use their knowledge too.
Of course, and that will be tapping into their intrinsic motivation too, in terms of they'll have a bit of autonomy there. They're almost guiding the learning. You're letting them guide the session within reason, where you just stand back and help nudge them in certain directions. But of course, use those students who are more confident and comfortable, and you can use that as a talking point, if you like. For any of those teachers out there, though, Gemma, who are indeed worried, even now at this point in our discussion, are still thinking, yeah, I'm still not that sure about gymnastics, could you just share with us a top safety or class management strategy for delivering a session of gymnastics to children?
Okay, so safety. Okay, so I would probably be saying, lots of the children are desperate to do things like handstands. So think about how you can break that handstand down. So, for example, putting your hands on the floor and then walking your feet up the wall. That is taking weight on your hands. That's the handstand. For example, doing a bunny hop sideways, that's the cartwheel. So do you have to do the full skill? No. But can you break the skill down and make it nice and simple and know that it's safe? And if you're worried about the safety factor of it, once they've done those 10 times and you can see them slowly building their legs up a bit higher, you know they've built confidence, you've built confidence in them, and then you can go on to build those skills up. So really think about breaking the skills down, making them more simple, so that you can then build the skill as your confidence builds as the teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say, though, to a teacher who's got that child or children in their class, and I've had children like this, who sort of, I guess, they rate their own ability probably higher than what it is, and they don't really have a sense of fear or a fear factor, and you're saying, well, this is how you break it down to gain confidence and make it easier. I can see this particular child is not going to be expert at it, but they're adamant they can do it, and they're going to do it the hardest way possible. And there's maybe that sense of, I don't know, you don't want to bubble wrap them, but how do you manage that child in your class?
Well, I'm quite strict, so I'll probably say, right, there's certain things you're not allowed to do at all, but how about we challenge you by, I don't know, rather than doing a forward roll and trying to go as high as we can into it or something, how about you add a different way of getting out of it? Without the actual child in front of me, it's quite hard for me to say exactly what I do.
Of
but
course.
I am quite strict about them not doing dangerous things. But I try to challenge them. I find those children sort of quite fun to teach, so I might try and challenge them in a different way. I think they want to do something that's impressive. So I would think of something that's still quite impressive, that's fairly simple, but they don't realise it's fairly simple. So I was talking about a forward roll a minute ago. So rather than standing up normally, I'd get them to stand up in a straddle shape. Or I'd add something else onto the end to help make it more.
I think ultimately, isn't it, Gemma, about you just need to have those ground rules from the very off. Your first session, you're setting these ground rules about what you expect from the children, what they can and can't do, what you should be seeing and not seeing. And if you can get that sorted straight away, and class teachers who teach their class all the time, you'd hope would have these relationships and ground rules in place, then that shouldn't be a factor or an issue. And then there can be other school policy steps if children do step out of line, of course. In terms of gymnastics in a primary school setting, I delivered what I thought was a quite simplistic unit to my Year 5 class recently. I don't think it was too taxing, although I think I pitched it just about right for knowing my kids. I knew them and where they were roughly at with their physical ability. But if I was to propose to you what primary PE gymnastics should look like, sort of transitioning from Key Stage 1 through to Key Stage 2, what do we start with in Key Stage 1 and dip in and out of? And by Key Stage 2, where should they be at?
I'll tell you what I will say is start them going forwards and backwards as quickly as possible. So there's no reason why reception children shouldn't be thinking about rolling. Again, it doesn't have to be the hardest form of rolling, but they can do rock and rolling, so sitting on their bottoms, rolling backwards and forwards in a ball. They can be doing log rolls, maybe not going from dish to arch quite yet, but maybe rolling along sideways, maybe doing what I would call like an egg roll, so in like a tuck shape, rolling across their backs and things. Because I think you'll know there's these children that you see by Key Stage 2 who are absolutely terrified of tipping themselves forwards and doing a forward roll. And it's because they haven't experienced those sensations, and we're not being all that brave sometimes in our general lives. And I think if we do let them experience some of these feelings and sensations younger, then that's quite important. So yeah, I would start off with all the basics in the Key Stage 1. I would have as much fun as possible. So make sure the games are fun, make sure the activities are fun, make sure it's fairly fast paced so they're not sat there watching and listening too much. And then when you get up into Key Stage 2, start to consolidate it a bit more. Still keep it fun, still keep it exciting, but start to link skills together and start to actually create really good-looking gymnastic skills. Obviously not with perfectly straight legs and pointed toes like we'd kind of be expected in club gymnastics, but something that does resemble a teddy bear roll or a circle roll, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, do you agree, Ryan?
No, yeah, I do. I'm just listening, carefully here to everything that you're saying. And what a standout point there is, when you were saying about they don't have to be perfect pointed toes and their sort of form in what they're doing. I think I've been guilty of this, and I'm sure many teachers are, on sort of hanging on that as being a sign of what gymnastics should look like. But remember, we're not trying to make our class of 30 kids elite gymnasts. If they want to pursue that further, that might be something they do out of school hours, but we're just giving them the basic principles and acknowledging and rewarding them for their efforts and what they are doing to a point, if that makes sense. And yes. I think you agree, over-parenting maybe can be a factor early on of why children don't want to forward roll. I've just experienced this with my children, actually, and a few just weren't up to it, and they didn't feel comfortable because they haven't experienced that sensation or explored enough from when they were children. So actually getting them to do a forward roll, even if it was myself supporting them to do so, was a huge achievement for the children for me in Year 5, and they had a great sense of accomplishment and success doing it.
So I'm seeing children who are terrified to jump off of things. I'm seeing children who are terrified to climb, and I'm seeing children who are really scared to roll. And I just think there are some children who are not experiencing this jumping off a wall somewhere or climbing up a tree, or because society is being a little bit more careful at times.
That's me. I did the same with my son, my firstborn. I was even the things that I enjoy and know are beneficial. I was quite overbearing at first, and don't do that, and be careful, make sure try not to do this. And I can see just about now how it's impacted his development, and he is overcoming some of those difficulties he has. But I do take him to a number of different activities around Harrogate here. But my daughter, on the other hand, I don't know if it was second child syndrome. I was way more standoffish with her when I took her out places, and it wasn't down to neglect. Of course I cared about what she was doing, but I've been there once with my son, and I was more standoffish and let her experience things for herself unless she was in absolute danger. And just the difference in them and their physical abilities and what they're prepared to throw themselves into, even now, my daughter's 3 years younger than my son, is remarkable. And I put that almost entirely down to how I treated them when we were out and exploring when they were toddlers.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I've got 3 boys, and my first son, he was very physical, and my third son, very, very physical. My middle son's very, very tentative. But that's a little bit of personality trait. But my youngest son, he recently fell off his bike, and that was through being under cautious. So that's probably his place in the family. So, you know, like you're saying, I probably have given him a little bit more of a free rein, and he went up a bicycle ramp that he thought was a ramp, but it was a jump. So he went straight down the other side over the top of the handlebars. So yeah, I think their place in the family, or how they are being parented, definitely does have an effect on them.
It can be, can't it? I want to pick up on a point that you mentioned as we were discussing the progress through school of what gymnastics may look like. And a term that you mentioned a couple of times was, you know, as long as it's fun and exciting. Now, if I was to just throw this out to you now, Gemma, and say, well, if you were teaching roles, some of the roles you mentioned, like an egg roll or a forward roll, to Key Stage 1, or even indeed revisited in Key Stage 2, what would your top tip or idea be for making those roles exciting? Other than your personality bursting out for those children, they can see your passion. How do you make it exciting for them?
So we do lots of running around in PE, don't we? So we ask our children to run around all the time, and we ask them to run around in different ways. So I would say to them, as you run around the hall now, okay, every time you come across a mat that's empty, obviously don't roll over anyone. Every time you come to a mat, I want you to roll in a different way. So you can do a little army roll, you can do a little log roll, you can do a forward roll if you would like to. But anyway, and they love doing that. So run around the hall as fast as you can, making sure you're not bumping into anyone. Be mindful of the space you're in. But every time you get to a roll, you'll see them smiling and laughing and having fun. They love that. It's a great activity. Give it a go.
That sounds like a great one. I enjoy that an awful lot. Now, how would you, again, putting you on the spot, how could you go about modifying that if you're a small village school? You've still got a class of maybe 24, 5 children, but you've got 4 mats or 5 mats in your space.
So I would put some spots down on the hall, and I would say, can we think of a roll or a movement that we can do on this spot that doesn't need a mat? So, and then I would limit them. I'd say, right, we're not forward rolling, you know, but you can teddy bear roll on this spot. You can log roll on this spot. We need to really think about that in our teaching all the time, because we don't always have the facility. So yeah, don't be frightened of doing things like teddy bear rolls, circle rolls, log rolls, egg rolls on those spots that you can put around the hall.
Yeah, and hearing you say it, Gemma, is, you know, it sounds like absolute common sense, but if there's one thing I've learned, first time I heard it from my guest, Professor Damien Hughes, back in episode, it was 47, I think, or so, was common sense isn't always common practice. And hearing you say it sounds obvious, but there's just a great tip for anybody listening straight away if you're limited on equipment, or of how to do rolls but in a more active way than queuing up and waiting around mats. Just get them moving and having fun. Maybe work in some kind of storytelling, or even have some music playing, I don't know, to really jazz it up. But that sounds like a great idea, Gemma. If I was to strip back the overview of what PE and gymnastics looks like going through school then, and taking it to a standalone individual lesson, what for you would a 45-minute gymnastics PE lesson look like from start to finish? What would that journey be?
Well, I'm a great believer in the fundamental gymnastics shapes. So your stretch shape, your tuck, your L-sit, your straddle, your front support, back supports, dish, arch. If you can incorporate those shapes into your gymnastics lessons, you know you're teaching quality gymnastics. So I would say a fun warm-up game incorporating some of those shapes. So it could be Simon Says, or it could be stuck in the mud with those shapes. It could be follow the leader, but on every spot make a shape. It could be make a shape and half the class have to go under that shape. So whatever it is, whatever game it be, I would say that you should be doing 1 to 2 games of fun gymnastics with a reason, or maybe if you're in the lower key stage, it should be going on an adventure. So you might go on the bear hunt, or you might go to the beach. But in amongst that game, maybe if you're going to the beach and you're putting suntan lotion on, you're sat in a straddle whilst you do it. So I think that you should be trying to incorporate those gymnastics shapes. I know you've used some of my posters before with all those shapes on, but you know they are all the things that I think we should be using to bring the gymnastics in, and it depends on the age group as to how you adapt the games. So obviously there's some games that are more suitable to the younger age groups than the others, and then it would depend really. It would depend if your lesson's going to be, I don't know, rolling focus. I would spend some I've talked a lot about rolling, so let's do something else. So let's say it's apparatus focused. So I would probably have a few different stations of apparatus that they're going to move around during the lesson. So I'd go to each piece of apparatus and I'd come up with some ideas from the children that they want to do on those apparatus and talk about safety. So we would probably then spend a little bit of time consolidating some of our ideas before they then went off and explored them. So I suppose whatever it is, so be it you are doing, let's not say rolling, but say you're doing cartwheels that week. So maybe we'd do a little bit of bunny hop work before we then started to do our bunny hops or our cartwheels, and then link them to something else. So I would say your lesson should start with a warm up, and then there should be almost sort of say like some teaching and some real quality learning for the children. And then after that, I think they should be given some time to explore it. So I think that's how a really good quality gymnastics lesson should be like in schools. Yeah. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, the one word that really stands out to me that I'm hanging on, which I think applies to gymnastics, but every other curriculum area too, that you mentioned at the end there, is explore. And we've picked up on this earlier in the discussion. You mentioned this, having the children that opportunity to explore what they've learned, explore what they're about to learn, come up with ideas of how to use equipment, or of how they might traverse along something or roll around something, and fueling their fire by simply giving them the reins and saying, show me, impress me, what could you do, how could you do that different? And I think a lot of that boils down to your questioning as a teacher at the end of the day too. But let them guide the learning, even in something like gymnastics. Gone are the days, I'd like to think, where we have the equipment out, and as the teacher we're saying, right, so at this station here, you've got to climb on and do this, and then you've got to jump and you've got to land in this way. Well, I like what you just said. I love it, Gemma. Just throw it back to them. This is a station we're at to now. How do you think we could use this piece of equipment today?
Yeah, and I think going back to what you said about safety, if you spend that little bit of time before, so if you do talk about a safe landing, but it doesn't matter if you land forwards or backwards, or if you talk about this is how we stand up properly from the floor, but you could stand up sideways, or you could stand up backwards, or you could stand up forwards. I think if you're teaching them the quality points, but then letting them explore them, then it's exciting for them, and then they're more happy to work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And again, if you're listening along, I hope you're taking mental notes or physical notes to this and jotting them down to revisit and give it a go the next time you've got your class or are indeed teaching a gymnastics-based unit of work. I think it's great stuff to add in and to try and implement into your teaching repertoire. Of course, as teachers, Gemma, we all go through ups and downs, and coaches the same, have bad days and great days and good days and really terrible days. And I'd like you to share with us, the listeners, what is one of your worst experiences of coaching or teaching gymnastics. It might be a full session, it might be just a one-off incident, but I'd like you to tell us what was going on in that moment, what was going through your head, but ultimately what you learned from that and how it's helped you develop as a coach and teacher.
So I went, when I first started working in schools, from a very strict environment. So club gymnastics is really different to educational gymnastics. So I went from a gymnastics club where I had sort of a 1-to-8 ratio, and quite often about 1-to-6 ratio, and I had other assistant coaches with me, and it was very prescribed, the gymnastics we were doing. And then I was asked to go into schools and to help share my knowledge, and at times I was given classes to almost take over myself. And the thing I remember the most was actually going from being able to run a class of 22 gymnasts, no problem, to suddenly having a class of 30 children in year 6 and being absolutely terrible at the class control and thinking, I'm not actually sure if I can do this, having quite wild classes, and then having to realise, okay, I'm fantastic at gymnastics, but I don't actually have a clue about class control for a class of 30. And adapting gymnastics activities to a class of 30 children was actually a huge challenge for me. And now I've been doing it for sort of 8 years. It's no problem at all. But I can still remember to this day the first class that I came out of and thought that was awful. Like I knew what I wanted to teach, but I just actually didn't know how to. And the way for me that I got around that was going and watching other teachers. So I suddenly realised, okay, I'm out of my depth here. I need to go and watch other teachers. I was given a really good idea of having a box of bean bags, and I'll never forget this. I don't use it very much anymore because the class control seems to come naturally now. And they used to be in 4 different colours. So I'd group the children up at the beginning, and it'd be red, green, blue, yellow, or something like that. And then if you were behaving really well, you could go and put a bean bag on your spot with the right colour, and then we'd have some kind of reward for the children that had the most bean bags on. But little things like that. I had none of these skills or talents.
Yeah,
and they had to come from learning.
I completely get where you're coming from, the sort of the class management side of things, and that's why I always say that the cornerstone to teaching for me is relationships, and having those strategies and procedures and routines in place before any teaching and learning occurs. That has to be sorted first. And I came from a background of coaching football, and I was coaching football to children who, the best way to put it is, they wanted to be there. They chose to come to football. Yeah. Football was their life. I didn't really have to manage any behaviour. To them, it was almost like an idol. I was just putting on activities and sessions, developing them, and there was no class management. If I go into a class and work in a school with 30 children, not all of them want to be in that particular lesson, and it might not be of their interest, and it's up to me to win them over. So I do have to manage, expectations and behaviour before I can get any quality teaching and learning done. But it's great to hear from yourself that it's a journey you've been on, you've experienced it, and I'm sure everybody listening has had that same lesson in a variety of areas where they just leave and they're shaking their head thinking, what on earth has just happened and has gone on, because I've not taught anything I wanted to teach. The children were misbehaving left, right and centre, and thinking, questioning, imposter syndrome. Can I do this? Should I be doing this? But I think we have all experienced it, and we've all been there, and we will all continue to be there. There's still sessions I leave now and I think, oh, yeah, I'm not convinced that went quite as well as I would have hoped. But then you have days where you come away and you think, wow. Yeah, I think working with children, you always come across someone that's unique. And so you think, I can do this with anyone. And then you come across someone else that's unique and you think, no, I've got to completely change my thinking again today. But I think that's why I love what I do so much. I love that challenge. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering if, from your years of experience and you've learned from the class management side of things, I know you've touched upon a few little games already, and I always ask my guests what their favourite warm-up or instant activities are, Gemma. I'd like you to perhaps share two. And if you were doing a workshop with a Key Stage 1 class and then one after it for a Key Stage 2 class, what would be your go-to warm-up activity for a set of Key Stage 1 children? And then same question again for a group of Key Stage 2 children.
Okay, so Key Stage 1, I think with the very, very young children, they're a little bit apprehensive about taking part sometimes. So a few years ago, I wrote a little storybook called Bendy, Wendy and Jumping Jack Join Gymnastics. And it's all about being nervous about starting gymnastics. And the story basically goes through finding attributes that you are good at. So you might not be very flexible, but you might be really good at jumping. And the book's actually interactive. So as you read the story, they can do some jumping and they can do some stretching and some climbing. So I love doing that one. If I wasn't doing that one, I love the good old, we're going on a bear hunt, making wide shapes when we're gonna catch a big one, and I like going up onto my tiptoes and doing over and under. If we can't go over it, we can't go under it, that kind of thing. I love that. With the older children, we play this game called Horse and Jockey, which I love, and you stand in a circle, one behind the other with your partner. One person runs around the circle, the person in the front has their legs apart, and when the teacher calls a command, like they might say, let's say horse and jockey, for example, you carry on following the flow of the circle. So if you've only just gone past your partner, you can't go back to them until you've gone all the way round again. You go through their legs and jump on like a piggyback. And you make up all sorts of different partner balances for that. So you might do You might do a beehive, I call it. So hands and knees, with hands and knees on top of the other one for the older key stage. I've done some videos with that, and my forthcoming gymnastics course that we're going to do, we'll have that game on. So yeah, just fun game. I think, like I said to you earlier, just making the games fun.
Yeah, and that, again, that's a great way when you're first starting out with a group of children like for yourself, you maybe never met, sort of win them over early on, building relationships by doing something that they're really enjoying and getting them to smile and getting them to laugh. And I think already you're opening a few doors there to what could be a successful session, of course. Now, we'll say, question to almost finish our chat today, Gemma, for you, which I know a lot of primary schools, vast majority over here in the UK in particular, struggle with, is space, and space when it's at a premium, and even equipment to an extent. You know, we've got dinner tables at the side, there's a piano over there, we've got a hall, which I know I've done a video on YouTube before of a hall I worked in which was 7 steps wide by 14 steps long, and you've got 30 kids in there. It's not a lot of space to work with. So from your gymnastics expertise, what's a top tip from yourself for us teachers to teach gymnastics when space is at such a premium? It's limited, you maybe don't have as many mats as you would like.
I definitely think giving the children different roles. So you and I have talked about it before. So like one's the gymnast, one's the coach, and one's maybe recording something. So then, you know, only 10 people are actually doing the exact skill, but the other 2 are observing. You don't want to be doing that for too long, so you don't want 2 people stood still for a long time and 1 person doing it for ages. So you want the roles to quickly change around. That's a good tip. I would say don't forget to use the walls. Teachers forget that the walls can be used. Yeah. So children can walk, I talked about it earlier, they can walk their feet up against the walls. If they're waiting for something, they can be bouncing the ball or throwing the beanbag against the wall and picking it up. I do lots of things against the wall. And I think that's another tip to remember.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of schools who've got that wall space available. I'm just painting a picture in my head now of the school hall that I'm currently working in, and there's literally no wall space to use. The side walls, which are joined onto classrooms, have got the climbing equipment pushed back against them, so you can't actually access the wall. Okay. And I think that's sort of a problem I've come across with in the past when I've wanted to do striking and fielding type activities, and I've thought of cracking games where they need to strike something against the wall if I'm inside, and then I've thought, I don't actually have a wall to do it against. So it is almost thinking outside of the box, isn't it, of what you can do, but certainly grouping different jobs and roles, rotating around, and I've always found that whether it's a cooperative learning unit or even a sport ed type model where they're earning points for the way that they're taking on their roles within their teams will just give them that little incentive to want to keep pursuing, even if they are just recording something or coaching something, until it is their turn as well. But I agree with you, keep that quick and snappy. You know, you don't want 10 minutes of you being the same role. We're talking a matter of a couple of minutes. The main thing I
learned with the class control was if everyone's doing something, then there's less time to get distracted.
Yeah, absolutely. Always keeping them busy. Teacher talk time to a minimum within reason, but I feel that the more you get to know your kids, the more you can get away with longer periods of talking, which I think sometimes is a great thing. I'm a big fan of interaction between the students, reflecting upon their learning and visualising what they've done or what they're going to do.
Being a child very much as well is that one time that I was picked to show everyone, and I think we need to remember that too. So just every now and then for someone to feel, oh my goodness, I've been picked, you know, I must be doing something right. And I think the ones that really struggle with gym, if you can find something that they're really good at and point it out and maybe show the whole class, you can instantly see their self-esteem rise in front of you.
Yeah, certainly. Just looking for the good and looking for the progress, celebrating achievement as opposed to celebrating, you know, the person who is the best. Celebrate the successes and who's trying the hardest and the effort. For me, in everything I do, classroom or not, is always a thing that I strive to look for and do. Now, before we leave you today, Gemma, and all of the knowledge bombs that you've shared with us, what is the best way that the listeners of the PE Umbrella can stay in touch with you, follow your journey? So social media handles, websites, and all the like.
So, do have a look at our Facebook pages. So get involved with the Head Over Heels Gymnastics page. Go and visit our website. So www.headoverheelsgymnastics.co.uk. On that website, there's lots of freebies. So we talked earlier about the posters. So there's some poster samples on there with lots and lots of gymnastics skills on there. There's lots of links to free resources, and obviously there's our paid resources. So we have 3 gymnastics instructional books. We have some lesson plans on there that you can buy. We have the posters that you can buy. We've got links to our masterclasses that we run up and down the country. And we're just in the process of putting together online gymnastics courses on Teachable. So at the moment we have all of the gymnastics skills on Teachable, so that teachers can download that course. But this month we're just in the process of filming 8 gymnastics classes with the pupils in, and that will be available probably by about March, April time. So that will be a really great resource for you. But more than anything, we're on Twitter too. So more than anything, just get in touch. And if you've got any questions, or if you think we can help you, or if you want us to come and visit your school, get in touch and we'll see what we can do.
Perfect, Gemma, thank you. And there we have it, PE Umbrella community. Make sure that you check out those social networks and the website that Gemma has just mentioned, packed full of awesome stuff that will help you with your primary PE gymnastics teaching. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode as much as I have and gained a lot from it. But for now, though, I want you to keep on motivating, engaging and inspiring the children that you teach, and I will catch you all again very soon under the PE umbrella. Thank you so much, Gemma.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to the PE Umbrella podcast today. I genuinely hope you found some useful nuggets of information and insight from this episode. Remember, head on over to peumbrella.com for all of the show notes from past episodes to browse at your own leisure whenever you want. If you've got a spare minute, please head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate and review the show. It really would mean the world to me if you could do so. Thanks so much, and I'll see you again soon under the